Thank you for joining me for another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today's episode is called Prestige Protocol, A Touch of DECOR. In this episode, we have the privilege of listening to Mina Martinez, the CEO and founder of Prestige Protocol. We learn about her early beginnings and how she has been able to overcome so many obstacles, both personal and professional. We discover that her dedication and tenacity allowed her to obtain a position in one of the most sought-after companies. She managed to stay there for over 30 years. What an achievement. Welcome, Mina Martinez. Let's get started. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you so much to the audience, to the viewers, to the listeners for joining me and a special guest today for another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today, I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing Mina Martinez. Mina Martinez, she is the founder of Prestige Protocol, where you learn and I learn about business etiquette and international protocol. She worked at Boeing for 34 years. Aside from managing her own business, she has a passion for volunteering in various Los Angeles charities. Welcome, Mina Martinez to Success Innovation. How are you today, Mina?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. And it is an honor to join you, Lazaro. I'm really grateful for the invitation that started back in maybe sometime last year, but we kind of firmed it up in April. And here we are, July.
That is correct. Yes. It's been a couple crazy months with the whole COVID and how everybody's kind of doing remote work from home type of scenario. And we'll touch base on that because you and I were having a little conversation before we started. But before we really dive into that aspect of the interview portion, I want to get to know you and have the audience get to know you a little bit better. Who is Mina Martinez? Where were you born and what was your childhood growing up like?
Wow. Well, I'm a born and raised and educated Angelino. I was born in Hollywood. And at the time, my parents both met in Mexico, but they came here for the journey of a better life. And so with that, I guess the west side of Los Angeles is basically where I did all my upbringing. And it was quite an experience of knowing, jumping in from culture to culture, because even within our own family, we had all of this multicultural relationships going on. So I got to learn that way a lot. And having been educated in a private school, for a good 12 years, that also brought a lot of experience and a lot of discipline. So a lot of things started very young for me, where I just wasn't able just to get up and do what I wanted to do. As years go by, you do that. But when you're disciplined at home, my standards, they were imposed on me very young. And, we had to do what we had to do. If not, you're going to get that piesco, that little, you had to be careful. And so I had a wonderful upbringing because I had an opportunity to learn so many cultures just in the environment of our apartment living. We had several years like that, all through my elementary childhood years up to high school. It was in a apartment structure. And I was blessed and just highly favored by having the Latino, African American, and Indian culture just in my own, surroundings. And we just, that is how it started for me. And so I knew we started learning how to respect. And as kids, we don't think about those things, but if you have a culture at home, you know you're going to follow it.
Right, for sure,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you were in private school. So I'm assuming that education was highly valued in your family by your parents for their kids, you being one of them. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So pursuing a college education, was that something that was instilled in you by your parents, or was the goal to finish high school?
It was both. However, it was the dream of my parents, but with both of them having to have two jobs each. And I was the eldest of three, had the responsibility leaning on me, at a very young age. So I took it seriously and I thought, college was probably not going to be soon, maybe later, because as things developed, I knew I was going to have to help out somehow. And that helped not just domesticated, you know, by doing the things and the chores at home, but that did get me to, you know, how I ended up being, uh, you know, my person. And eventually, you're going to get out there in the professional world, and you're going to be doing a lot of different things. So I lacked in a lot of things, but I know the reasons why. And when it came to going to a high school, girls only, that institution actually had such an effect on me because those were the rules. You know, they're going to go ahead and make better women of you to serve, be a servant leader. And that's where the community support and so forth just opened up for me. And I just ran with it.
And you mentioned servant leader, and I want to clear this up for the audience. You know, you don't mean like a servant. You mean like a person, a leader that actually serves the community where you're at. So if people understand what leadership is, real good leaders, they're actually servants of their community. They're not uh, kings or tyrants. Those are not necessarily good leaders. Good leaders are those people that are always on the field, that are always with the people, that are always with the community, working side by side with them. So that is a servant leader. And I think that's what you mean, correct?
That is exactly great language.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just want to make sure that we don't have any misunderstanding from what you're saying to the audience, and that we don't get any issues with that, and that people understand what we're trying to say, and that we
Yes.
start changing the mind and the culture, more so because of what is going on right now at the national level of instability, where a lot of people have this hatred, this anger. But I think to a certain degree, you have to step back and you have to understand, all right, if I put anger out into the world, I'm going to get anger out back towards me. But
Yeah.
if I put positive and, serviceable, and I essentially, I'm a good person, a good leader, and have good community outreach type of settings, that is essentially what I'm putting out, and that is what I will get out from the world back. So positiveness creates positiveness,
Yeah.
negativeness creates negativeness. And,
Mhm.
and that's something that I believe strongly. And I think and I hope that the audience is capturing and catching on that. And I hope, and I think that's what you're trying to also say to the audience in this conversation. Um,
Yeah.
what are your most fondest memories from your childhood?
I mentioned the cultural experience and
Yes.
having been, um, you know, brave enough to have changes in our culture by allowing others and not just sticking to yourself. You know, I was that kind. It was just if we were out playing, because you did say you know the childhood.
Yes.
It was we only had certain hours to be outside. You know, it wasn't like be out there for the whole day and then you just come home for dinner. It didn't work like that. And so what little time we had, we treasured it, whether it was the neighbors coming up inside our house or we go outside or just outside. You know, we had a structured way to you know, be friends. And before you knew it, it was an opportunity for us to be inclusive of other friends. And we always did that. I always was that kind of person. I didn't say, no, you can't join us or something, but there were so many that were, and I would only watch that. So I was very observant from the get go. And, you know, if there was somebody who had something that wasn't, good for them, they stand out because, you know, they had a broken leg or they had something that was not right for them. I would make a conversation out of that. And then just before you know it, they're talking because they're so shy, they didn't know that they could be a part of something. And whether it was the jump rope or hopscotch, you know, that led to a lot of things. So before you know it, I was like the leader of the pack in that particular apartment unit that we were in. And I just took that, you know, wholeheartedly. And I thought to myself, you know, the women that we're going to strive to be, maybe that's a calling for me. And then I just found it to be just a way of life for me. And I always made people feel good. And that's what they told me. And I thought, wow, I'm really glad. I was just doing what I thought was the right thing.
Right, right. What you felt in your heart was the right thing to do. That's fantastic. Let's fast forward to high school. You mentioned that you're in an all-girls high school. You graduate, and then how do you manage to get into Boeing, one of the top companies in aerospace engineering? How did you manage to get into that?
I have a couple of steps to say before I actually get,
Right. Yeah. No, go
right in
ahead.
there.
Yes, go ahead,
Because
because I don't know the story, and that's kind of like, did you go straight from high school into Boeing, or how do you actually manage it? So,
not even. What I had in mind was hopefully college, but that was not an option because I actually had two jobs already while I was in high school, and those took my time. One was on a Friday because we had half a day, and for several months, and then it became my first job entry to be able to go full time and work in an office environment, starting with the files in the human resources department. And it was through a friend's relative that said, "Oh, we're looking for an opening, and it would be great if someone's bilingual." Well, guess who? So I was able to get in that route. But the other thing was, not only did I have employment opportunities because I had to work, I needed to have a car. It wasn't an option that my parents were going to be able to support that. And I thought to myself, okay, so I'm going to backtrack. I came into high school with a leg injury uh, that turned my whole childhood upside down because it was an accident in 8th grade, just right before we had to take the exams to get into high school. So I couldn't. They passed me. I was able to pass into high school without taking the exam. That's a big thing. You study with the big book, and I was doing that already. I was studying. So the injury happened on the property of a Catholic school. So that's where I was going for 8th grade. And turned out that I was in traction because I had a compound fracture on my left leg, which led to 6 weeks of being in the hospital. But then I graduated. So I came out for one day just to go back in, the whole wheelchair thing and all. But I had 3 casts. And when I finally got the third one put on, which was a walking cast, I had a body cast first because it was that severe. It never came out of the skin, but it was just about to. So fast forward, my parents, they were like not knowing what to do. And I'm underage, so they couldn't, I'm a minor. So it wasn't up to me. So we had to get, attorneys involved and all that. It got to the point where the possibility of my success in my leg was either to have it amputated, and that's because my choices were to have a screw put in, and that screw was going to mean I was going to have something. It was not going to be right. It was going to be popping out like this, right? That's deformity. Or the fact that I'll get gangrene. And the gangrene was the part that my parents said, no, no screw. We're going to go natural. Whether she's going to be limping, whether she's going to whatever. But the screw was the 80% gangrene. And we go, oh God, no. Right? So
okay.
that's what that you're being told you're going to have your leg amputated. And here I was in volleyball at the time. I wanted to make it. I was in varsity for 8th grade and was going to go into the high school playing that. Didn't happen. Was a cheerleader for 4 years for an all-girls school, and that's about it. But I have to tell you the optimism I had, and I just thought I was going to be there a couple of days. It turned out weeks and weeks that I had to be there because I couldn't walk, and I couldn't get out until my bones were, okay to do so.
Fused
So
together,
that's
right?
how I got into high school, and then I had the whole thing with the muletas, the crutches and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And then of course it was a 2-story, institution. And it was so difficult for me to go up and down, and there were not elevators. So I took that as a very deep and brave lesson, right? Because I had people that can help me, and others didn't want to be late for class, so they had to get going. And I couldn't go fast. I had to go the way I had to go, so that you learn a lot of things, and you have to mold yourself to what you're actually going to be dedicated to. And that's 4 years of Catholic education.
Right.
And I did what I could, and I tried to stay as calm as I could. And my story I kept explaining it to so many people. But I guess I took that as a lesson because nothing was going to keep me. I persevered, that number one, more than my parents did, and because that just drained them financially, having had an accident. And you can't take things for granted like that. And, so healing was a big part of that. And so we come from a culture of music and la cultura, eating, everything you can think of what's culture, right? In Latin America.
Right. Right.
And so I met I had a very high influence of the Cuban and Puerto Rican culture.
Okay.
So my language increased better, better, better. I just ended up speaking so much faster because that's, the culture of that language.
Right.
So English was not my first language. It was Spanish.
Okay.
But I turned in 4 years in high school. I was able to, at that time we had these Selectric typewriters. First, it was a little kind that you just go like this, right? Okay. The reason I'm saying that is because that is what got me in the doors to Hughes Aircraft. We were Hughes Aircraft when Howard Hughes was still around. I heard about this after a while, but that job I landed because of my friendships. I was at that time connecting with so many people, and whether it was through high school or whether it was through, little parties that we had, we got to know people. And there was this one family that we got along really well. And he was already working. And he said, if you're interested in an office job, let me know, because I know you're taking typing and shorthand. I don't know how many people know about shorthand.
Okay.
But that time, it's a special writing. It's like code. Yeah. Okay. So you're writing like in swirls. And so that's what got me in, because of my aptitude for typing and shorthand. And that's what they needed at that time. So here I am applying. And it took almost 2 months before I heard back from them. It wasn't a week. It wasn't 2. It wasn't a month. It was more than 6 weeks before I got an answer. And at that time, you had to fill out an application. So you had to hear back, right? There was no computer, none of this business that we have now. And so I said, oh, geez, what if? I don't know if I'm going to get that. So another position became available in a law firm. This is right out of high school. And I applied for it. And it was not too far. It was in the Wilshire, Beverly Hills area. Okay. And they needed somebody who could translate and be a transcriber. Spanish, English, English, Spanish. Okay. And I did that for like about a month until I was able to hear from Hughes, because I said, oh goodness, this is not going to work for me. Transportation, number one. Oh, okay. It was really hard to go back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then one of the strongest things that I learned from that is that because you knew the Spanish language, I felt that they were taking advantage, because the pay wasn't equivalent to what I was doing for work. And I would have to take this transcriber home to be able to turn in the, what you call depositions, mm-hmm. because this is a law firm I was working with, right? Yeah. So I got into it right away. Why? My typing, the speed I had, the shorthand I had. But then they use what they call, what is it? Like the court reporting, they use a certain little machine. Okay. So you have to know certain things. Remember, this is all this technology that we had. Right. So those kind of things were great. But then when I get hired from Hughes, I go in because of my typing skills and again, shorthand. So I'm pivoting from the law firm. It was so strenuous for me. I got too nervous. I just said, I don't want to come to work like this feeling nervous. I want to be happy to go to work. I want to just say, this is where I want to go. Right. And then that's what Hughes did for me. Wow. And then eventually we got acquired. 20 years later, we got acquired by the Boeing company. So at my 20-year anniversary, that's when I started seeing the light on another way, because at the company, we go through transitions, we go through levels, and when it's high or when it's low, and depending on employment, we go with what you call a RIF, and that's reduction in force. Okay. And I've never been laid off except for my 20-year anniversary, when all the company was going through changes. I always saw it on the other end because I was assisting executives, and I know who was on the line, who was going to get cut. I knew all that. But with the responsibility that one has, you have to keep that, because you kind of swear in, you're going to have loyalty and trust, and you have to keep that with every manager. And I did that for all of my years of service with the company. Always be honest, and things will, go better for you. So 34 years with essentially one long company. Even though it got acquired, you didn't seek to get a different position in a different company. Nowadays, it's essentially unheard of for the new generations
to stick around with the corporation for, let's say 5, 10 years. A lot of people tend to move at the 5 year mark just because they follow the money for the most part, and they want to acquire more experience because you get paid more if you move. And I think part of it, a lot of the corporations have started doing that on themselves because they pay more for people that have more experience coming from somewhere else. And so that in essence starts creating this back and forth for individuals. But you've managed to do 34 years in one company. How did you manage to do that? And was that a conscientious decision, or was that something that just kind of happened?
Well, Lazaro, I have to say to you that I had opportunity come when they see that you persevere for something and that you offer your services more than what it is that your job title is supposed to be. I never had a thing for titles. I always worked to learn more of it. So as years go by, you're just happy you're there. You're happy you have a paycheck on a weekly basis. And that's how I got in. And that I was so enthused with that because at that time we didn't have any virtual this and that. When the first telephone came out, I was working for Hughes Aircraft, the satellite organization. That's where I came in. Out of all the product line that there are, from tanks to submarines to airplanes, which eventually, helicopters, Hughes helicopters. I mean, I'm going to an area that I was so inspired just by being next to engineers and scientists. I'm like, no, nothing but books everywhere. Some of these offices were like falling apart. I said, oh my God, we need an office cleanup here, because that's how they work. They go, no, don't touch it. I know exactly what there is there. Okay. And the books are all stacked and you barely see them, and I saw that. And then I go into executive row and I'm looking at, oh my goodness, you could hear a pin drop. I don't think I want that environment. I want to be with the worker bees. And eventually I had a manager that was just like that. He said, if you don't mind it, but know that I'm not going to hold you back. If you would like that next position, because I see that there's going to be an opening and they're targeting for you. And I would have management talk to me like this. So it wasn't like spur of the moment. At that time, there would be recommendations. Eventually, it got to the point where we had to apply for another position through the system so that all fairness could be there, right? So flexibility opened up more. But it was basically by word of mouth and how diplomatic you were and so forth. And I always enjoyed, remember, we are an aerospace company. We served a global customer daily. And I had the opportunity as an administrator and then eventually became an office manager and then became, executive senior. You can't go any higher unless you're working for the CEO, and sometimes I didn't want that promotion. Why? Because you were going to be more stringent. If eventually when I had family and I had the children, I had them in school, I had to get out of there by 5, 6 o'clock the latest because I had responsibilities away from my work. And some of those positions that you had back then, you had to be 24/7 for them because that's how the aerospace industry worked. We were on satellites, we were talking launches. If your manager needs something and you're not available, then you start feeling like, oh, you're not delivering correctly and all this. So I was put into a lot of hot spots at one time. And I said, was that a skill that I learned from? Yes. But at the same time, I was teaching them because everybody was rushing around. Nobody taught them that, hey, your shoelace is undone. You're going to trip. Be careful. And I would talk to them like that. And I said, if you're going to meet, you need your jacket. You just left it behind. They're walking out, their shirts all coming out. I'm going, you just want to take care of your grooming a little. Right. And that eventually became something that they said, oh, go see Mina, she'll tell you. Go see Mina, she'll tell you. It just automatically happened. So again, you don't know who's watching you. I keep saying that in my trainings right now.
Right. You never know who's going to be watching you. You could be at the supermarket and you could feel like, oh, I'm outside the office. It doesn't matter what I say, how I do.
It sure does.
How I, treat others. But then you never know who's watching you. It could be your next manager that you are going to have an interview with. I have an interesting story that somebody told me a a while back, and it always pops into my mind, like, it's exactly about that, where this individual was driving and he was a little bit late for an interview, and he cut somebody off, and the guy in the back sees who the person who cut him off is, and the guy who cut him off sees who the guy in the back is, right? Because he sees in the rearview mirror. But then he storms off, and then he parks, he gets to wherever site, and then he gets into the office, checks in, and he sits. And sure enough, when he walks into the office for the interview, there is that person that he actually cut off
Oh
in
my.
the middle of the highway. So it's like, oh my God, now my chances of saying whatever I want to say and getting the position are essentially gone because of the way I acted without really being considerate of the other person on the highway, which just
Right.
happens to be this manager sitting in front of me now for that interview. So that's kind of how I see it, and I try to keep that in mind every single day of my life, wherever I go, whatever I do. Is just, you never know who's watching you, and whatever you do, however you act, might actually come back and haunt you and have that repercussion if you don't really think about it. Yes, yes, yes. So you might have had many great and not so great moments while working, for those 34 years at Boeing. Can you share two or three of those great moments and of those not so great moments with us?
There was a number of affiliations that we had to support in the various departments that I was working in. I worked in finance, I went to marketing, I worked in, and this is now at Hughes, before we even got acquired by the Boeing company. We were Hughes Space and Communications. And part of that, we had supported the personnel in DirecTV. So DirecTV was the entertainment side of the business, right? So we had to entertain a number of celebrities, Michael Jackson, Steven Spielberg, because he was el mero mero. He was the one who they had to meet with for the DirecTV, connections. And I started, what I thought was important to me was, how can I give of my best, whether it's in service, remember we talked about servant leader, and give him that right cup of coffee or tea, or you eventually know who your customer is, you know what they want ahead of time because you make those arrangements. You just don't go cold turkey and say, would you like this and that? You knew already what they wanted, and that's what you offered. That's number one. Knowing the customer ahead of time, knowing them by their name, knowing their culture. One of the most, how can I say, impressive was when I actually was invited to represent. The Latino community was huge, continues to be huge. However, there was a lot of philanthropy work that was done. And there was organizations that the company would support, let it be a gala or a special dinner, but it's all fundraisers to the side that there's making scholarships, or they're there for other, reasons. The reason I'm explaining this is because that's how I got to know my community. They would just invite me. Here I get like an email at the time, or I get a personal invitation. It's on my desk, and it'd say, if you're able to attend with a guest, please let me know by a certain time. Where did it come from? My goodness, it's on my desk. Open it up, and it's a little note that says on there, and it's HR. So not to give names, I started getting like repetitive invitations, and I thought, this is really great. What is it that I'm what is it that I'm saying, number one, or am I conveying something that's either very positive, or I don't know what this means. What it meant is that they wanted a representation from the company to be at these tables, to be at these dining events, and eventually I just acquired a savvy for that. Like I said, remember, it starts at home. And one of the things that was so awesome to me is I got to meet the founder and the CEO, Dionisio Morales of the MAOF, Mexican American Opportunity Foundation. Huge. He has properties. He does this and that. They help the community back out with mariachi. They have everything that you can think of that they do back to the community service. So a request came to our what is now known as ERGs, employee resource groups. Back then we called them affinity groups.
Right.
And we would have our celebrations depending on what we're doing. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the Hispanic Latino community. They always had a thing for, can we do something for Cinco de Mayo, which meant getting the cafeteria involved, getting the menu and so forth. The event that we had was to have a entertainment. And so the question came to me, do I know of anyone that we can refer to? We need somebody like for Thursday. Here it is Monday. Thursday, because our original company did not make it or is not going to be able to come out. And so I was asked and I said, I'd be honored. Yes, I do know. In fact, I know 2 or 3. And so it turned out that not only did Dionisio Morales make it for the first time on the property of a Hughes property. And then this particular building is the one at Loyola Marymount University, which sits right now it's an office now for all their executives. It was like, with escalators and so forth. They called it the mall of business,
Yeah.
So we were there. I was there for 8 years. That was his first time he stepped there. It was the first time he teared up. But I knew how to receive him when he came into the suite. We were a huge suite, and we all stand. But like you have to know, the essence of cultures. Are you going to put your hand out? Are you going to bow? What are you going to do? You're going to greet them in their language. Bienvenido. Right?
Right.
Don Mauricio. So when they heard me say that, it felt right in, and he felt so comfortable because he said, later we talked after, he said, this is the first time I stepped foot on a company. I've never been to this level of an office. And I go, oh my goodness, and I'm here. This little person over here sitting and assistant to the Mr. Stephen Dorfman, oh my God, who was the president of Space and Communications. That's where things changed for me because I knew how to receive him. Then the mariachi followed in. They played. It was unbelievable because we know our culture. And it turned out, made them look good. It made our executives look good. That was an awe moment. So for that reason, they come to you and they say, hey, eventually, you're out in the community a lot and so-and-so. And I go, yes, I do know Dionisio Morales. And he says, well, we'd like to invite him. I said, okay, so what do we do? Do we do a letter? Do we phone call him? They didn't even know what to do. So eventually you start getting savvy about these things, is what I'm saying. So I'm celebrating something that I know. So that was just beautiful. What didn't happen once, what didn't go so well was with something that it was quite embarrassing. It was another building. This is later. Now we're Boeing, and there was service that was done. So a beverage service, and it was coffee, and they used styrofoam. Don't use styrofoam to drink water nor anything because it's so flimsy.
Right.
And if you're going to serve that because that's all you have, think twice and just go ask the executive suite or the customer relations area, do you have a China cup? Something that's not styrofoam. Because what happened with that customer was a German customer. He went to go get it and it spilled over the documents that they were reviewing on the table. It was a mess. It wasn't my fault. That was what was there already, that, they just put upside down, and you're never supposed to have a cup up so that you know how they stack up cups and you take up the top one, you're already touching your fingers. I mean, it's always upside down, and then you just take it up because you're holding it from the bottom of a cup.
Right.
So tip number 1, but just don't use styrofoam. And that was the most embarrassing thing. But I was the one closest there at the office. So they called and I'm going, oh my goodness, what's happened? And I had to go get the paper towels and the this and that and the other. It was a mess. But what they lost was the document, and they lost the customer because you served a styrofoam cup. You don't do that.
So be mindful of how you actually cater to your customers or to even your own employees, and what think of all the ifs and the possibilities that could happen in the consequences that that might have. That's
Yes.
an interesting
Yes.
story.
Very.
With all of this going on now, that everybody can actually apply online and submit their resumes to the job postings per se, right? It's a little different than when I started, because before you had to call the recruiter, or you had to meet with them face to face to a certain extent, and then you hand them your resume, your formal resume, it's printed out, and it's in black and white, and essentially you have that formality. And now I would follow with a letter with saying thank you so much for, for accepting, or for having the time to talk to me, and I look forward to a conversation with you further if you have any questions about my resume, and when do you anticipate I could definitely get a response back from you. It's a little more formal that way from what I see now, where a lot of students, a lot of young individuals are saying, oh, there's no need for a cover letter. Your resume, you can just submit it, have a standard one, just submit it as many times as possible, as long as you have the skills and some of the language that is there in the actual position posting. So what would you suggest as far as etiquette goes for individuals that are posting the resume as many times as possible, skipping the cover letter, skipping the actual interaction of networking and connecting with uh, recruiters in that aspect?
They're cutting their opportunities less by doing that. You have to go with the formality of how you were trained. If it means that you're going to start with a cover letter, you took the time to do that. One. Two, if you're going to go in and put in 10 times a resume and you don't have a structure where you are just following the keywords that you need to, because keywords is what's going to get you into the next level if you go online and do that. I don't know how sophisticated the system is anymore, but the structure, how it used to be, is that you apply and you needed to attach this, attach that, and attach so forth. If you have all four, then they'll look at you may be in that among those hundreds of people. So they start weeding out what didn't qualify. So you opened your own disqualification by doing it, DQ'd yourself,
Right.
just by doing that. So as an example, that's one of the things that you don't want to do. And I talk about this in my current classes, that it's so essential for people to understand that if you really go to the final, let's say you're on the panel for finalists, and you're going to have a panel of 4 different people, one from HR, one the hiring manager, however the way it is. You got to go, if it's virtual, you have to go like if you're there in person, and I'm going to say a little story if I may, but later. What I wanted to do right now is just don't put a sleeping giant to bed before you even think about applying for a job if you don't have everything done. So it's like to say, make your research, know what you're doing, because if you get that phone call to say we're going to have a phone interview, that's that's a prelude to like an alert. You may be on the line to come back. So that's how it is right now. They weed out anybody who does not have the right information that they're asking for. Let's say it's from 1 to 5 or from A to B, whatever you need to have. If you don't qualify and you're not feeling comfortable with that, don't apply. You're wasting your time and you're wasting the others. If you really are interested and you have those qualifications, you have those degrees, you know those keywords, then orale, go for it, because that's meant for you. And then you want to close out, let's say I'm going forward, let's say you have that interview, whether it's by phone or in person, pre-COVID we're talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go in, you have to go in calm and be passive, be the listener. Many put their foot in their mouth ahead of time by asking all these questions ahead of time. When they ask you to ask questions, then that's your time. And if you want, as a closing, make sure that you always have a mailing address to send them back a thank you, because that might be your ticket in. If there's 10 people and they've already DQ'd several, and now they're down to 3 from those 10, and you're one of those, if one of them sends a thank you out of those 3, think about who might get that job.
Right. because
There's
you're
nothing more than the simple thing of just saying, I appreciate the opportunity to have applied. Whatever the word's going to be, you took pen to paper. And that's how we were raised.
right. Yes, true enough, true enough. And I like to say, out of sight, out of mind. So if you don't do it, they never think about you. You go out the door, next candidate comes in, and the only thing they remember is the last person they actually interviewed versus the other person. I mean, they might have taken notes, but you leave a bigger impression if you actually follow through and take that extra time to actually write, a thank you email or a thank you card or follow up. And I always tell students and young professionals to go ahead and, wherever you go, even if it's an interview or if you run into somebody at a career fair or a convention, to ask for their business cards. A lot of people might say, "Oh, I don't carry my business cards and my business card anymore, but I can give you my LinkedIn account." So connect with them that way, but also ask them, "Do you have an email address that I could quickly jot down so that I can send you an email or a reminder of our conversation?" And a lot of people forgo that step, and so you might have that conversation, you might be engaging at that point, but if you don't ask for that information, that's it. You're out of sight, out of mind, essentially. So thank you,
Exactly.
Mina, for sharing that information
Exactly.
with us. Um, I want to ask you about, you retired from a Boeing after 34 years, and then we go into you founding and creating protocol and etiquette. How did that come about? And I'm thinking that it's because you started, grooming yourself or getting this idea from being such an interactive individual at Boeing Hughes at some point where you saw that there's a lot of etiquette that is being lost because of how people treat each other and how people actually interact in business meetings. And some of the engineers don't have that tact to actually engage in those conversations. But
Mhm.
I want you to tell us, how did that protocol and etiquette business that you founded come about?
And I appreciate you asking. The company offers a lot of opportunities for, as an employee, I mentioned the ERGs, the employee resource groups. So you want to become involved, if you can, on the external side, which is with your community, and then internally to the company, you would have external technical affiliations, known as ETAs. That's where, the organizations such as SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, would come in. Then you have NSBE. You have all the ethnicity groups that have all their engineering organizations going on. And then there's, beyond that, you have opportunities to serve others because of your relationships, which eventually now you have a network. And if one thing after another will lead to another opportunity, right? When you see that happen and you want to support that, your management, remember you said, people are watching you. They watch your style, they watch how you support. Can you really be gone for a week? Who's going to cover your spot if you're going to go to this ETA? Eventually, through the years, that's what it caught. That's what it meant. But they took the ones that took their job seriously and allowed them to go and support this particular community outreach that the company had as one of their values. They valued so much the fact that they wanted to develop, a community on the focus of engineering. We had to go out and start doing the recruiting. I became one of those opportunities that, because I was bilingual, but then it opened an opportunity to go to other states, because where that organization was hosting its event, and as you know, they travel. SHIP is not always in,
Right. It's not
in
always in
one
Los
spot.
Angeles, not always in California,
No,
not always in Florida. It's
they're
throughout the
throughout the
nation.
nation.
It's a
Yeah,
national organization. Yes.
exactly. And so is ALPHA, Association of Latinos for Professionals, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
I could go on and on with the acronyms. So that becomes your new cluster. And then you become a representative, whether you're a board member or however way you start escalating it. And let's not forget the universities. you are supporting students. And as a company, we are going to career fairs because we got invited. Yes, we're going to do it because the engineering, and I'm speaking engineering because that's the area that we were so focused on. And eventually, all of those volunteers would recruit others. And before you know it, you have like a little group that says, oh, we got this coming up. Do you want to help support that? Because you've already seen them in action. They don't go to hold books. They don't go to hold the door. They go to do the purpose that the company's asking to do. So when I was put out there by my leadership and they said, everyone needs to be at their best behavior, number one. And if they're not, bring it to their attention. Absolutely. But they didn't know that I was the one that's going to do that. So when it came back to the AAR, after action review, who did what and who did, who took off and went and had their little coffee time that they wanted to do because they just decided to take a break and they weren't following the protocol from the company at a career fair. Those little things mattered. And I started seeing the way things were, some people just were saying, oh, you better watch out because someone's going to watch you. And I just said, just be careful. The leadership is watching. I didn't have to give names or anything. So in other words, it's a trainer training a trainer, right? These schools that are going to be coming to the career fairs are your community. It's going to be high schools, maybe even middle schools, but definitely your college. So by the time you got there, you get to see an increased awareness of development of these students. Gee, I just saw them as a freshman. Now they're a junior, and they're coming to this career fair. That's how, I'm just talking 3 years in a row. So the kind of things that benefited me is the fact that I could still share and let them know what's ahead for them to be prepared for. That's what the role was for all of us that were out there to do recruiting to do. So let's go forward. 6 years in a row, we supported South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, okay? 6 years of an event that was hosted by UTPA, University of Texas Pan American, which is now under their name. What I learned from that is the fact that not only was I asked to attend when I was working for a manager that wasn't the person asking me to assist in this team building that I had to do because there was travel involved. Imagine all the logistics to get a group of 5 people, which ended up being 42 one year, because that's how many people we needed to go because this thing was huge. 10,000 people. This event got to be huge. It was HISTECH, Hispanic Engineers Science and Technology Conference. They involved the congressman with a congressional dinner at the very, very beginning. Yes, I was asked to be there. So I had to take care of all of those things in the role I was leading with. And then we would break out and we would go into schools and we would be talking. Did it for 6 years. What I saw the need for was these children. They have such an urge to learn. And then I was teaching them basic manners. And then I was asked, can you come back and do that as just a course by yourself? We'll get you a conference room. You'll have a class of 50 students. I went like this, 50. I go, oh my goodness. Here I'm used to the 12, maybe 15 max. Right. They did that. They packed them in. So that became like a ritual because there was so much impact with that. And in speaking in the professional presence, I had my own, and then I had my professional presence. I thought, which hat do I wear now? Am I going to wear the mom hat, my mother hat, being a parent, or am I going to wear the global representation of the Boeing company like I'm supposed to? Well, I put both. And what did that turn into? Speaking in their language. You're going to South Texas. The majority at UTPA is 95%, it's now 99% engineering, Spanish speaking. So when my manager said throughout Boeing, out of all the Hispanic networks that we have, can you give me some recommendations? Because we need to put a team together. We're going to do this, that, and the other. I'm going, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Loyalty. So that means you're going to have a loyal following. If you supported this 4 years ago, are you in the position that you'd like to right now? They would say, and I would do a general message. So again, I had to know how to write. I have to know how to compose. And that was something that I was able to build up and show others how to do it, because this had to work like wildfire. I had to go across all of the Boeing networks to say what I was doing is I was increasing confidence, letting them know you can do this. But we need, if you can, if you're bilingual, that's even a better advantage. Not necessarily do you have to be. I didn't want to be non-inclusive. I was doing this as an action that my boss asked me to do. And that's where all the following started happening. For 6 years, we did that. And I can tell you who those employees are. And they're still, when they heard that it had to come to a close because the company was cutting off due to budget constraints, they were not going to provide the university supports anymore. So what happens to the executive champions that were championing those schools?
They would go ahead.
It was such a letdown. It was so hard. So fast forward, the professional presence that I had there allowed me to say, if these children, these students, these chavalitos are so dynamic and wanting to learn something, and they gave me the opportunity to put a class together and let them know what it is to have manners so that you know how to go into a job that's going to offer you. You might not be working for the company here, the Boeing company like we're working on. And, we have our Boeing t-shirts or whatever, not t-shirts, but our polos, right? We had our attire. We went in as a uniform look. These little children didn't even have like the same t-shirt to wear all week because they were so limited with clothing. So one thing led to another, and I just can tell you that just broke my heart. And I said, what can I do to make, and they call it now, make a difference. Back then, I just said, what can I do to feel gratitude that I can help somewhere? An opportunity came up at UTPA, the same university. I offered to be the point of contact, and then eventually they just put me as the lead person of a suit drive. I made a proposal, I gave it to them, and I started it with 10 suits of my own. Before, these students did not have a suit to interview in. And I was hoping, and you have a certain size, I probably was between 1 or 2 sizes different. So I had different, but I started asking my friends, do you have any suits that you're no longer willing to wear? Or maybe you are, that they're still able to wear.
Donations, right?
Yeah.
You were asking
That they're lightly worn, Right. And before you know it, I had the engagement of, I don't know how many people. The thing was, how do we get them there? So I packed 2-3 suitcases every time I had to go to this conference, and they would have them available, not for sale. This is a donation I gave. And then I just started that. So that was one of the things that started lifting up those that needed to go to interviews. And I can tell you, the dean of the school, it was just something I was effectively doing. It wasn't anything that nobody asked me to do, because it brought me joy to see something that I can help. Because in South Texas, they were so limited. And that's what made me do the business I have now.
Okay, great. Okay. So I'm assuming there's been some obstacles during your path to actually build protocol and etiquette, this business that you have. But can you share with us 1 or 2 of those big obstacles and how you were able to overcome them?
Right now, jumping forward, we're in one of the best things I have is the e-learning business. That's what I'm getting the company into, because I pivoted with the COVID thing. But it was right before COVID that I was already in that process of trying to go digital platform. Before any of this is funding. Funding is one of the obstacles. It's so difficult to get out there. And don't get me wrong, there's people that are just giving of their time and of their own pocket to support my work, to support what I did. And I said, it's not for me, it's for the students, but this is where it's going to go. Yes, I am not a 501c3. I'm not that way. I started off as an LLC, and I did that for 3 years, but I had to go dormant those 3 years because illness set in for my mom with Alzheimer's. I had to go dormant with the company for 3 years, and that cost me, because it costs to be an LLC. There's an annual fee. And so that money just went to wash, So I said, I have to change. What can I do? I talked to my attorney who represented, Prestige Protocol. He said, why don't you try going sole proprietor? I said, okay, let me understand what that is and so forth. More money out of my own pocket. And to this day, that's how it's been. So that's one of the obstacles is trying to get funding where, you know, it's going to be helpful. So I'm hoping that going virtual, you know, that recurring income will take place in a different format. So I'm very optimistic and I'm hopeful. And I'm just hoping that not only here in Southern California, where I live, but I believe that in all other, because of what COVID has happened, it's opened a global opportunity. And I could be teaching, and somebody from the Netherlands already wants to come on board with me. And she's also an owner of a protocol school. We met through LinkedIn because she heard one of my trainings. We have a lot of multicultural things to exchange. So I'm grateful for one thing, but very few people know about manners and etiquette and protocol.
Right, right. It's not something that is taught in schools anymore. It's not something that is mainstream. And you mentioned it in one of the texts that you sent me. You're teaching a lost art. Something,
a lost art.
So it's something that it is an art form. And like I mentioned to you in one of the postings that you had a while back, I said, you know, there's so many forks and so many spoons when you actually set up a formal dinner table. I usually get lost on whether you grab the one from the outside and then work your way in, or is it the opposite way where you do the outside and work your way out? I forget. So, you know, that's essentially how it goes. It's a lost art, but I'm glad that you're doing it. You know, you mentioned SHIP in Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Yes. I want to focus on that one because I'm a member of that one, and I'm assuming you right, and I'm assuming that you're a lifetime member. And how did you become involved in SHIP? What was your first, your first encounter with SHIP?
It was through the company. We were asked to represent, as I mentioned, going out to the career fairs, and certain universities were having these fairs, and eventually conferences. The SHIP was holding a conference, and so Boeing would have an exhibit booth, or any other company that had to do with STEM. So when I went on my first one, there was a representation because we had a nominee. The company has there's an awards component of a conference usually, and it's usually toward the end, right? But all of that making that it takes at the beginning, there's, you know, all of the lunches, the breakfasts, everything is meant for somebody, right? And so I took an interest in something like that, and I volunteered. I started saying, may I help? And in this, you know, and then eventually I thought, what does it take to be a member? Because you're helping, you're kind of like the waitress, and you're watching and you're serving, but you're listening to the program going on. And I found that to be just amazing. All that talent that was up there and all the awards. And then when the military came up and they had to award someone, that presence that they had, just all elite. It's like, wow, you know, I just said, I'd love to serve in that level. And so I started watching. And that's what led me to take my training at the Protocol School of Washington. But I learned those organizations because before I became a member of SHIP, I had also been very involved with the Boeing Hispanic Network. Prior to Boeing, we were Hughes, and we called it the Hispanic Network. It was only South Bay over here. So we had other companies like Raytheon, Northrop. I could go on. And okay. It was an opportunity to be an inclusive membership. And so what did we do? We went out and helped to, in other words, like we found it very enjoyable to teach what we did in our sphere of the company, you know, whatever we were doing. Mine was administration. Mine was effectively networking. And so those skills is what attracted others. So they said, you know what, this is your forte. This is what you're good at. Maybe you can help with the conference preparation. Would you like to do that for SHIP? I said, I'd be honored. So see, they're always watching you. They'll come around and I'm not going to say they're going to handpick you or select you, but someone's going to recommend you, because I was in that role, recommending people from certain sites. And before you know it, they said, I'm not sure how we got invited, but, you know, we're here. My management said, and I'm like keeping to myself. I'm keeping quiet. I said, you know, I'll speak when I need to speak. The thing is right now is that we need your talent and we need you to come on board. So can you be a representative for here? And so that's how I grew my, how can I say, the followers, and other companies. So they started to see that I was I was like a role model, if you will. So they asked me, would you mind coming on board as a board member, internal to Boeing? And that just escalated. So I did 4 years, I did 2-year terms of president and vice president. And then I just started escalating from there. I thought, oh my goodness, now what? Because they saw the outreach, they saw the administrative part of me, not the technical part, because that's not me. But now I'm more tech savvy than I've ever been because of what we had to go through. So you learn as you go along.
Right. Yeah. So every day is a learning opportunity for everybody. You became a lifetime member for SHIP. What does that really mean, and why did you decide to become a lifetime member?
Well, because I thought that I just thought there's no limitations in what you can do in any organization. But that organization is pumped up, and every time they had like a rally or something going on, it taught me a lot because I saw las ganas that everybody had in there. And I go, oh my God, this is a great program to be a part of. And then they said, and there'll be a special for this year. You'll be a lifetime member if you only pay this, which you were saving quite a good chunk of money there. And so I talked to a couple people. I said, hey, you know what? They're having this for membership. What do you think? 5 of us signed up. They saw that we were motivated. They know we're board members of other things that we do for Boeing. So it's credibility. As an example, I just want to share that with you. Credibility, trust, and loyalty goes a long ways. And so when it came to that, I was inspired by saying, you know what? You want to join me in being a lifetime member? This is what it's going to cost. And if you can't afford that, so I took a student and I said, I'll take care of your membership. Person was just coming out of college. So now that's like something that they do. It's a given. Now they're asking for anybody who's a lifetime. I think they did it because they did it last year and we were present. How many can sponsor someone to come in? So it's gotten to that level. See, ingenuity is just working all over the place. And so I thought, how can I help with your programs? Well, they said, number one, your presence and what you know, your wisdom and what you do, that in itself is what we need, because we have engineers and this and that. They need to be trained. And I said, I'd be more than happy. So you see, where you help one and somewhere else, you can help many more. So with that opportunity through SHIP, I said, of course I'm a lifetime member, because I want to dedicate helping what I didn't have that young. I didn't have these things until I was a professional.
That's fantastic. Yes, and I've seen you very active, and I want to acknowledge you for everything you do. And I noticed that you're very active. And I had a conversation with Tames, and she's a very, very intriguing and dynamic woman. And I'm fortunate enough to have her scheduled to be part of one of the Success Innovation interviewees. So that should be coming up, and that would be interesting to hear what she has to say. You also are a mentor, whether you know it or not. I'm thinking you do. But what does it mean to you, and what does it make you feel to have actually people look up to you in the way that they do for what you actually do?
I have to share that there's a lot of motivation and empowerment that I've seen, that I've been an example of, or that I follow others because of. And I think that there's a lot of truth to those words, because there is, just imagine, I've always said, keep your heart brave and your imagination wild. And when I tell students that, I've never heard that. I've never had anybody tell me something like that. They give me little comments like that, and that to me is an awakening, right? Because you're engaging with them. You're speaking their language. We need to come down and get off of our, role model hierarchy positions that we're at and talk to them one-on-one. And that's what I love doing. And that's when they come back and they said, you're doing all this effort for us? We're just little people. And I said, you're not little people. You got a lot to go ahead of, and you're going to grow. So if you consider little people, what is that telling me? What body language are you trying to talk to me about? He goes, well, I never been taught these things. Oh my God. Another thing that just broke my heart. So grace, patience, strength, courage, all of these things that you prepare like in business for clients, but I started young with children. And it's just the nature in me, I guess, because not everybody has that knack, so there's a lot of things. And that's why I love teaching civility, because I know it comes from 34 years of experience, but really 22 that I've laid cold-hearted into it,
Right.
and I could be well versed and tell you upside down how many adult and youth organizations I have supported, because I believe in their mission of what they do.
Right.
Yes,
Definitely.
there's so many organizations out there.
Right. So at this point, you retired from Boeing after 34 years. You have your own company of protocol and etiquette, and you've been a very successful individual. So what do you, Mina Martinez, envision yourself doing next? Are you going to continue growing your business? Is it going to go virtual, full on virtual? What exactly do you envision Mina Martinez doing what's the next step?
I really want to see progress in the online business. I'd like to go that route, because if it does escalate to that, eventually, if other than my home, because this is what the new office is right now, if there's an opportunity that I can pivot to a location that I can service when we get back to the in-person, because that's what I've been doing all of these years. This pivot has really been something for me, because I'm used to going in person and doing what I do hands-on. And now I'm having to innovate a whole other way. My dining room now became my office, which now I need to move the office into another room and modify, because what I might do is just start having, if it comes to people being able to come over, I will do that, because that's what I was doing ahead of time with celebrities too. And to save their name, I would not pronounce and mention. But talk about a lifetime opportunity. This one thing after another. So I eventually would like just to go global, and I would love to be teaching on the other end what they don't know. And we call what we have is Western etiquette.
Right.
The ones that are on the other side, and I say other side, that are in foreign or international grounds,
Right.
they need to learn the Western way to come in, because they're going to come in the way they know. Right? And
Yes.
without having to escalate and go up and down the thermometer, if you will, because there's so many differences in protocol. There's etiquette and there's protocol. There's two different worlds, but you have to understand both of them to make them both happen. And it all takes steps. So what I've done now, Lázaro, is I've written how to engage everyone through a spoken presentation where I'm not there in person. So luckily, I have 22 years of material that I can utilize, because it's my experience. And you could Google anything you want. And I've told this to other people too. There's nothing more than engagement and having the eyes focused and understanding and speaking for them. Not just speaking, I'm done, good luck. I don't do that. I take a step at a time. So my modules are going to be depending on what they want to learn. Remember, I'm a women-owned company. So I have a lot more work to do because I'm self-funded. So I'm going to try to see what I can do to make that course content as attractive as I possibly can, and as an encouraging and educated manner that's going to accelerate the learning of everybody else. That's what I'm hoping for.
I hope that you reach your goal of going global and reach, the outer extent of wherever you can definitely connect with people that are interested in learning about protocol and etiquette. So that's amazing. What do you believe your superpower to be? If you don't have one, would you select one, and what would it be and why, from any superhero that you see on TV or the comics?
That's the superhero.
Yes.
How could I? Ay. Like you're talking like cartoonish kind of, or superhero?
if you have a superpower that something that you believe is your superpower, what is it and why do you think it's a superpower? Or if you don't believe you have one, would you select a superpower from any character, fiction character, and why would you select that superpower?
Fiction character. Oh,
Right.
wow. You know, having having the spirit of having been able to be raised and understand what it was to see people like Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, those role models, those are the things, those are live people. Those are superheroes to me.
Okay.
I know about the, things that I see on TV, more the commercials and all, I mean the ¿cómo se llaman? Oh man, and they are characters. See, I don't even know their names. So I used to watch a lot of television when I was much younger, but those are the other ones that inspire me now. Is that level,
So
Dionisio
Oscar,
Morales, the
right.
yes, the ay, ¿cómo se llama? Um, oh, and in the music industry,
Okay.
for instance, Gloria Stefan. I mean,
Okay.
everything she did, and look at the accident that she ended up having to do, right? And now she's
Uh-huh.
not so much in that because she's in education, writing books, educating, and people don't know that. So it's I took a little bit of everybody. That's how I kind of say, to be able to make a pie.
You would take a little bit of everybody
I
to be
think I
able
would
to.
have to say that. I would, because I see so many supermodels right now that I just they're not my supermodels, but for somebody else they may be. I'm more because of what I saw coming up and growing, because I supported those organizations. Those are my supermodels.
Right.
Those are the ones that I want to be out there to, you know, to champion for. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So, do you have any particular book, movie, or podcast that you believe has made an impact in your life and that you wish more people would actually take advantage of watching or listening or reading it that you could recommend for us?
I have something that has really touched me because of how I've in leadership roles that I've had to take uh, just dedicated to reading something. I came across the book of values, and that's by Dr. Betty Uribe. Values, and there's a lot of components in there that if you don't read about it, that could make or break you. There's from diplomacy to government leaderships, how to actively get involved. And just knowing those values is exactly what you got to stay with, because if someone's going to hire you, one of the questions could be, what are your values? What do you follow?
Right.
And you got to learn that. So that's an excellent book. And there's so many others as well. I mean, I could go into, the training on the success of your protocol and your etiquette. I mean, there's a whole slew of that, and I have a library myself, that I well invested into. But I think Values by Dr. Betty. It's #values.
Okay.
I would
Hashtag
think that
values
would
by
be
Dr. Betty.
extremely beneficial. There's a lot of things that I think would guide a new reader, the millennials. Oh, please. There's so much wisdom in that book. There is wisdom. And I think everyone's not trying to read anymore because they think that they could just, on
Google
the
it.
fly go and think what they can do. And
Right.
they're just taking the wrong judgment there. So I
Right.
think that's a good book to have.
Okay. Values, but values. Check out that book. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. What is your definition of success? I mean, you've been a very successful woman, working 34 years, retiring from Boeing, founding your own company. But what is your definition of success?
Determination, loyalty, resilience. I have to say, I have all of those little things running in me, but that's what I think it is. You have to have that to be able to support a success.
Okay.
A vision.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, a vision that carries forward that you're able to, hopefully improve on. But having those core values, that's success.
Having those core values, that is success. Thank you. That is amazing. That is wonderful. And for those individuals that have watched and followed the episodes of Success Innovation, there is an episode that's about 10 minutes long that actually I talk about why it is important to have your core values, to actually take some time away from your busy schedule to write down your core values, because exactly what Mina mentioned, if you don't know your own core values, how can you go into a corporation and say, I want to work with you? If you don't know your own core values, whatever corporation you might be working for also has a set of core values along with the vision and mission statement. So in that episode, I described what is important, what you should do. So go take a look at that episode if you're interested in learning
Wow,
what your core
absolutely.
values
Yes,
are.
yes, claro.
So on this last question of the interview, I really enjoyed this last question because I want you to go back in time to that little Mina Martinez that is in a cast with her leg, and she's about to graduate from middle school. And I want you to go back and if you only had about 2 to 3 minutes to share about 2 to 3 pieces of advice, what would you share with that young individual as she's sitting in the hospital, pondering about what her future will be like? What would you share with her?
When you're facing real limitations, your imagination starts running, and it did with me. Looking up while I'm lying down in a hospital bed with my left leg up and traction. Traction is something that's going to hold you up for a while. And when you go back down, your blood circulation, everything starts changing. You get nauseated and all that. So I dreaded having to have my leg put down because I felt best when it was up high. And I would always look up at my leg and said, will this still be me when I get out of here? And keep in mind, I'm just in like you said, in middle school. And I'm thinking, where did my childhood go in that time frame? It was like, I thought it was going to be a week. No more than a week that I was going to be there, It wasn't like that. So all of a sudden, all this stress starts impacting me. I worried for my parents that they were going to be mad at me because I was not careful enough playing. And then what happened is I was playing, when you have that limbo and you're raising like a stick to go underneath and you try to go on as it keeps rising, it gets lower, lower, lower. Well, this was like pivoting when you have a pole and you run, and you jump over. I forget what you call that.
High vault.
High vault. We were doing this on a ground that was it was very
unstable,
uneven, very uneven. Mm-hmm. And we would run, and then what happened? It was a ¿cómo se llama? A jump rope, and they were holding it. It's just to make it like a stick, just strong like that. Well, I took the run, but I never had a chance to make that because my leg cracked. Well, I was already in the air, and then I landed, and so I landed twisted in the rope. Where after telling my mother all this, she was convinced that they tripped me. I said, no, mommy, they didn't skill me. I said, I learned skills. I learned resilience from that. I never thought that I would have a regular life when they told me about the leg situation. And I literally said to myself, I'm going to go forward. I have to do something better. I have to prove to my parents that I'm going to be okay. Because I started worrying about my brother and sister, who's going to take care of them. Because my parents had 2 jobs each. Remember, I started to say that. So I was raised in a very confined space. And I just ran with what motivated me. And motivation is so key for people. So please make sure that, my mission with the company is that I teach essential skills to those that don't know any better and develop them better. That's why I say my tagline is, to have personal development wherever in your life you can, because you don't know when something's going to stop you. And never lose confidence. Never lose confidence.
Never lose confidence. That's great advice. Thank you so much, Mina. Yeah. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for the interview. Thank you for answering all those questions and providing so much wonderful insight to the audience. Thank you so much for watching another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you for joining us. Share the episode with somebody that you think would definitely benefit from the content. Definitely appreciate your following me and listening to the interviews. Once again, for Success Innovation, this is Lázaro Herrera. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for finishing another wonderful episode with Success Innovation. Today we learn much more about Mina Martinez. We get to know her at a personal level. I personally was mesmerized with her story about her having the tenacity to continue going after her accident and her leg being broken. It was motivating to hear her speak about Prestige Protocol and how working in the Boeing company allowed her to see the need for decorum and protocol to be maintained. The success and empowerment of Latinos is high on her list. Thank you, Mina Martinez, for all you do. This is Lázaro Herrera for Success Innovation. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.